WTIM. Welcome to the WTIM Morning Show. I'm Avery Cooper. People's Bank and Trust, proud to bring you this stream on TaylorvilleDailyNews.com's Facebook and WTIM TV YouTube. They put people first, along with Landmark of Taylorville, where you always do better with Landmark. I'm here with Christian County citizens to protect the aquifer. That's Karen Brocklesby. Welcome into the program, Karen.
Thank you, Avery. Thanks for giving us the opportunity to discuss our concerns.
And Mark Roth, great to have you here.
Hey, thank you for having us.
So, goodness, the aquifer, right? Obviously, there's a big pipeline coming into the, proposed pipeline for carbon capture and storage. And, I also just wanted to introduce Karen is a farm wife and mother and grandmother who's a landowner in the proposed site. And Mark Roth is also a lifelong resident of Christian County, currently a retired farmer, landowner, and chair of the Christian County Soil and Water Conservation District. Safe to say you guys are pretty qualified to talk on this issue.
I believe we are.
Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit about the principal issues that, as a farm owner, Mark, and a drainage district commissioner have with the proposed CO2 project.
Well, in Christian County, we've lived with a number of pipelines throughout the years, and we've had problems with a few. And most of the residents in the county are aware of some of those past problems we've had with gas pipelines and natural gas pipelines. The biggest concerns, as far as the farmers go, is the damage to the farmland itself can be extensive and long-lasting. Principal data from recently installed pipelines, and we're not talking 20 years ago, we're talking in the past 5 years, have shown that soybean and corn yields actually dropped 25 to 15% consecutively for 2 to 4 years. We have farmers who are still dealing with recent pipelines in the area that have not gotten their problems solved 4 years, 5 years after the pipelines went in. So past history is what you have to live on. The promises of the pipeline currently being proposed are promises, but they're not being kept as far as the historical data goes. So the pipeline itself is an issue because the dangers of putting a pollutant in a pipeline and transporting it thousands of miles across state lines is that you can always have ruptures. You can have problems with the quality of the pipeline. And the wells themselves is where you will probably most likely experience leakage. So those are all issues that farmers have to face and farmers have to deal with. And unfortunately, the long-term effects far outweigh what are being offered as financial compensation to the farmers.
Do we have an idea of what kind of pipelines have recently been installed that have led to that decrease in corn and soybean production?
Well, I will point out pipelines that are currently been under construction in the Midwest that have been in the news. I'm not going to name names,
right.
But everyone's pretty well aware of fuel pipelines that have been brought down from Canada and brought into the Midwest. So we're dealing with local farmers that have had these pipelines cross their properties.
Understood.
So the data has been collected by outside sources, and the data can't be compromised by the spin that the pipeline companies put forth.
As well, also, I mean, we've seen a lot of the signs about protecting the aquifer. What are some of those concerns about the aquifer?
Well, Heartland and Navigator have repeatedly told us that this is safe and that the CO2 will stay under the caprock. But we don't have to look very far in Illinois to see that things put under caprock don't always stay there. The Mahomet Aquifer has been contaminated by natural gas that was pumped under that aquifer by the People's Gas Company. It contaminated initially 5 wells, and now it's up to 30 wells, and the number continues to increase. The Illinois legislature has gotten involved, the Illinois Attorney General's office, and still those people don't have safe water. And their property values have plummeted so that they can't sell and leave. There's a similar situation in LaSalle and Livingston counties where the Nicor Gas Company pumped, it was natural gas, not CO2, under the ground there. And it is bubbling up in the streams and actually causing death in the fields. I mean, it's killing crops in the fields. And that's been happening for years now. So now we have the Heartland wanting to pump CO2 directly through the aquifer here in Christian County and under the aquifer. And they maintain that it will stay under the caprock. But we have evidence that that doesn't happen. And when CO2 combines with water, it forms carbonic acid. And as Navigator has been showing us, or Heartland has been showing us, that aquifer is a rock field. And carbonic acid has the potential of leaching heavy metals out of those rocks and depositing those heavy metals into the aquifer. So this is indeed an issue that affects everybody who wants water in this area, not just the landowners.
What do you make of the claim that there are already thousands of pipelines going through the aquifer, water and gas and otherwise?
There are probably not thousands in Christian County, but there are several pipelines that are near the aquifer. We have, unfortunately, these have been put in years before, and the citizenry was probably not as well educated or as aware at that point in time of what was taking place. Like I said, we've had to live with pipelines in Illinois and in Christian County for a long time. We have pipelines that are basically less than 3 feet underground now. I get a letter every year from a pipeline company on a property that is just outside of the Taylorville city limits that tells me do not plow a depth of deeper than 12 inches because of the risk involved. They have not come out, dug up the pipeline and made it deeper to make it safer, mind you. And so this is the history of pipelines in Illinois. And as with any business, corners can be cut. As with any wellhead, problems can, become a real issue. The monitoring wells that they're speaking of, which is their safeguards, is they're not going to go down to the same depth as the well that is actually injecting the CO2 solution into the sandstone. So they're not going down to the depth. The actual technology for seeing what is going on at that depth is just in the fledgling stages. And so they can't really monitor what is going on at the outpouring of the solution into the sandstone. They will not know until it's too late whether or not it's even being absorbed at the rate they want it to be absorbed. A local project indicator that has been touted as a success has put in only in the million ton. We're talking this project, multi-million tons of CO2 solution every year. So you're talking a vast expansion of the type of facility that you see in Decatur. Also, the facility in Decatur has only been able to capture 50% of their goals. So it's not an efficient example to begin with.
So it sounds like to me that even if the claim is true that there are thousands of pipelines going through Christian County's aquifer, it's not even really the fact that there are pipelines going through as it is all the other concerns, right? It's more of a that's more of a non-starter point for the concerned citizens.
Yeah. Everything that is being run through the pipelines are polluting if they leak out of the pipelines. So be it CO2, be it natural gas, be it fuel, it can pollute the area. Probably the biggest difference between CO2 and fuel is that fuel is not so dangerous to the people on the surface unless it blows up, okay? But CO2, if it reaches the surface, can lie in low areas, and it only takes about a 17% mix of CO2 to air to make it fatal. So we're talking a different kind of stealth danger here if it reaches the surface without being caught. And a monitoring well is basically going to tell them after the fact that they've got leakage.
Right. Which to that point, that's going to be too late.
It's going to be too late, and it may be too late for the local municipalities. Nothing is being said about the training of first responders in the area. Most of these pipelines go through areas that are socially vulnerable. Rural areas are one such area because they don't have the tax base most of the time to have other than volunteer first responder departments in most small cities, most small towns. Taylorville's got an advantage of having a full-time fire department. How much training they have in facing the threat of a CO2 leak on the surface, I'm not certain of.
Right. And if that's just Taylorville too, and not to mention all the surrounding
small towns.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. That have significantly less resources. I want to reintroduce you both. This is the Christian County Citizens to Protect the Aquifer, Karen Brocklesby, along with Mark Roth here on the WTIM Morning Show. More from them after this quick break. Your stream brought to you by Landmark of Taylorville, where you always do better with Landmark, and People's Bank and Trust, where they put people first.
WTIM. When did elections become a game? Like hide and seek for grown-ups. Tricky grown-ups. Look at Rodney Davis. Do you ever hear Davis talk about his votes to send your tax dollars to Planned Parenthood? True. Davis voted for taxpayer funding of Planned Parenthood. 4 times. 4 times Davis voted for taxpayer funding of Planned Parenthood, the biggest abortion provider in the country. You won't find that on his campaign website. See? Hide and seek. There's more. Davis once bragged, quote, "I can't wait to work with Nancy Pelosi." And then Davis voted with Pelosi 1,077 times. Rodney Davis, you know his game. Davis talks like a Republican here and votes like a Democrat in Washington. Paid for by Conservative Outsider PAC, copac.us, and not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee. Conservative Outsider PAC is responsible for the content of this advertising.
On May 24th, the families of 19 school children in Uvalde, Texas, lost their boys and girls to a lone gunman that went into their school and killed them and 2 teachers before police were able to stop him by ending his life. Based on an idea from a fellow broadcast group owner in Texas, the Miller Media Group has a way for you to express your condolences to the families, the school staff, and superintendent of the schools in Uvalde that have been affected by this tragedy. Simply send an email to this email address, texaskids@randyradio.com. That's texaskids@randyradio.com. All emails we receive will be printed, put in a binder, and sent to the Uvalde, Texas school superintendent so he, his teachers, and students know that we in Central Illinois are grieving with them. Please send your email by 5 p.m. June 30th so that we can get the emails printed, bound, and shipped to the Uvalde, Texas school superintendent and continue keeping these families in your prayers. This message from the Miller Media Group.
What are you watching?
Those governor candidates accusing each other. It's awful. I've done my research and I'm voting for Gary Rabine. Gary Rabine talks about real issues, slashing property taxes, loosening restrictions on businesses, and supporting law enforcement. Rabine built one of America's largest paving companies from scratch.
I'm Gary Rabine. I can and will beat Pritzker. Let's turn Illinois around. It's Rabine time.
Paid for by Rabine for governor.
Computer Techniques, also known as CTI, is bringing fiber internet to local homes and businesses. For lag-free internet with speeds up to 1 gig, find out more by clicking their icon at TaylorvilleDailyNews.com.
Westervelt Mutual Insurance offers a quality home insurance product that can't be beat and provides us with the peace of mind we need. Find an agent near you by clicking on their icon at TaylorvilleDailyNews.com.
Your information station, WTIM.
Welcome back to the WTIM Morning Show. I'm Avery Cooper. Your stream brought to you by Landmark of Taylorville, where you always do better with Landmark, and People's Bank and Trust, where they put people first. You can find those streams online on the TaylorvilleDailyNews.com Facebook or on YouTube at WTIM TV. I'm here in studio with Citizens to Protect the Christian County Citizens to Protect the Aquifer, Karen Brocklesby and Mark Roth. Great to have you both here.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So, Karen, I wanted to ask you about the pipeline itself. We talked a lot about the actual carbon capture and storage process that Navigator is proposing, but they're proposing a pipeline itself. And I don't know if at least I certainly am having a hard time grasping just the sheer size of this pipeline. I guess, what could you say about this effort to put a pipeline in Christian County and beyond?
This pipeline is planned for a 1,300-mile stretch from some states out west to bring CO2 to central Illinois. And it is collected as a gas from multiple, mainly ethanol and fertilizer plants, and compressed under high pressure into a liquid to be transported. And the pipeline that goes through here is supposed to be a 24-inch pipeline under a lot of pressure. And CO2 does not act like gas or oil. When the pressure is released, it can become explosive. And when pipelines that transport CO2 have a leak, they develop what are called running ductile fractures, and the pipeline just sort of unzips. And then this CO2 reverts to a gas, which hangs very low to the ground and displaces oxygen. And it's invisible and it has no odor. So people don't even realize what's happening around them, that they're being overcome by. And we need to recognize too that internal combustion engines can't operate without CO2, without oxygen in the presence of CO2. So you can't get away from it, and your emergency services have trouble getting to you. It's a danger to the people who live along that pipeline.
Essentially, I beg your pardon if I'm getting the wrong term here, but it sounds like asphyxiation.
It is. That's exactly what happens. People are asphyxiated.
Well, I mean, is there a way that this can be safely delivered? Do you think so?
The real answer to that is we don't really know. The technology of transporting CO2 in the quantities they're talking about is very, very new. Okay, they have used CO2 along with benzene and other chemicals in recovery of oil, but at the depth only of the oil fields. Okay, now you're talking about putting it almost a mile underground. You're talking about an area that you cannot see, that you have tested in labs and you have worked with over time, but not to the extent of these kind of projects. And this is brought on with the fact that we're facing climate change in this country and we're wanting to reverse it.
Right.
I'm for that. However, this kind of project and projects like them are going to be very, very sparse on effect. All of the carbon dioxide that they put in the ground in 1 year will not even make a 1% effect on what we produce in this country on a yearly basis.
Right. And sorry to interject here. That is the claim in the big reason overall why they say they want to put this project into Christian County, to capture the CO2 emissions to overall benefit the environment.
Right. As I said, it's less than 1%. So is it a real effective way of doing it? Most likely they would be better off working on technologies to reduce CO2 production. Right. So this is a problem because a lot of these pipelines are using this as an advertising gimmick to actually broaden the base of CO2 production plants in the Midwest. They're advertising for it in their product literature. Right. That doesn't shrink the amount of CO2, it increases it.
Karen, you had a thought?
Yeah, I just might add that when you look at the number of environmental groups who are opposing CO2 capture and sequestration, it's a huge number of environmental groups. This is not a green solution. This is a solution that allows petroleum companies to kind of continue business as usual and transfer the risks of this project to a local community like Christian County.
Well, we don't have a ton of time left, but I do have enough time for final thoughts from each of you before we do go. Karen, I wanted to ask you overall your final thoughts.
I would just like the people of this county to come to recognize that this is not just a farmer and landowner problem. This is something all of us in Christian County need to be concerned about, and we need to talk to our county board members and our neighbors about opposing this kind of project.
And Mark, anything else that you would like to add to the conversation?
I would like to say the county board has done a good job of hearing our voices over this issue, and they have put on hold any activity on it until they hear more information. In Iowa, the state legislature there has put a hold on any avenue of these companies using eminent domain for at least a year, and the people in Iowa are working just as hard as we are here in Christian County to put these things away for the time being until the technology and the time is right. It may be down the road that we would have to use this technology in order to store CO2, but there are other more effective methods that should be taken by the government before this happens.
That is Mark Roth with the Christian County Citizens to Protect the Aquifer. Thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you.
And also, he is here with Karen Brocklesby. Thank you so much, Karen.
Thank you, Avery.